The new sex position is called Brexit. It's when you promise to pull out but you don't. I used to shave my testicles with a razor blade. But since I got Parkinson's, I don't have the balls to do it anymore. When I was a kid, Santa gave me a lump of coal. The next year, I poisoned his cookies. Somehow the bastard found out and killed my dad. Harry and his wife are having hard financial times, so they decide that she'll become a hooker. She's not quite sure what to do, so Harry says, stand in front of that bar and pick up a guy. Tell him that you charge $100. If you got a question, it'll be parked around the corner. She's standing there for 5 minutes when a guy pulls up and asks, how much? She says, $100. He says, all I got is 30. She says, hold on, and runs back to Harry and asks, what can he get for 30? A hand job, Harry reply. She runs back and tells the guy all he gets for $30 is a hand job. He agrees. She gets in the car. He unzips his pants, and out pops this huge. She stares at it for a minute, and then says, I'll be right back. She runs back to Harry, and asks, can you loan this guy $70? Gorilla removal service. This guy wakes up one morning to find a gorilla in a tree near his house. He looks in the phone book for a gorilla removal service until he finds one. Is it a boy or girl gorilla? The service guy asks. Boy, is the man's response. Oh yeah, I can do it. I'll be right there, says the service guy. An hour later the service guy shows up with a stick, a chihuahua, a shotgun, and a pair of handcuffs. He then gives the man some instructions. Now, I'm going to climb this tree and poke the gorilla with the stick until he falls. When he does, the trained chihuahua will bite the gorilla's testicles off. The gorilla will then cross his hands to protect himself and allow you to put the handcuffs on him. The man asks, what do I do with the shotgun? The service guy replies, if I fall out of the tree before the gorilla, shoot the chihuahua. In an effort to bridge the cultural gap with my Hispanic friends, I've been saying machos a lot more recently. It means a lot to them. Tinder is the opposite of porn ads. There are actually tons of hot singles in my area, but none of them are interested in me. Working at an unemployment office must be so tense. Even if you get fired, you still have to come in the next day. A son walks in on his parents having sex. NSFW. The parents see the boy and he runs off to his room. The mother puts on her robe and goes into the boy's room. The boy asks his mother what she was doing. You know how daddy has a big stomach? Sometimes mummy has to get on top of daddy and flatten it. You're wasting your time, says the boy. The mother, confused, asks, what do you mean? Well, when you go to the supermarket, the woman next door comes over and blows him back up. What do you call a butt plug being used by a guy? A manhole cover. A midget walks into a brothel. NSFW. A midget walks into a brothel with a honeycomb under his arm and a donkey following closely behind. He asks the headmistress for a woman for the evening as his wife had left him. She says, sure thing, but I gotta ask, what's with the honeycomb and the donkey? He says, well, my wife found a genie's lamp and her first wish was a home fit for a queen and she ended up with a honeycomb. Then she asked for the nicest ass ever and so she got this very well-behaved donkey. The mistress asks about the third wish and the midget says she wished I had a dick that hung past my knee. She says, well, that doesn't sound so bad. It wouldn't be that bad except I used to be 6'3". It's a 5-minute walk from my house to the pub. It's a 35-minute walk from the pub to my house. The difference is staggering. My wife told me, sex is better on holiday. That wasn't a very nice postcard to receive. A truck driver stopped at a roadside diner for lunch and ordered a cheeseburger, coffee, and a slice of apple pie. As he was about to eat, 3 bikers walked in. One grabbed the trucker's cheeseburger and took a huge bite from it. The second one drank the trucker's coffee, and the third wolfed down his apple pie. The truck driver didn't say a word as he paid the waitress and left. As the waitress walked up, one of the motorcyclists growled, he ain't much of a man, is he? He's not much of a driver, either, the waitress replied. He just backed his 18-wheeler over 3 motorcycles. Do you have a USB wire thingy so I can charge my phone in my Honda? Best Buy Employee Accord? Me no, it's a Civic. I saw a poor old lady fall in the street today. Well, I'm assuming she's poor, she only had one in her purse. Baby Yoda's first word probably came after his second word. The Lone Ranger was ambushed and captured by an enemy Indian war party. The Indian chief proclaims, "So, you are the great Lone Ranger. In honor of the harvest festival, you will be executed in 3 days. But, before I kill you, I will grant you 3 requests. What is your first request?" The Lone Ranger responds, "I'd like to speak to my horse." The chief nods and Silver is brought before the Lone Ranger, who whispers in Silver's ear, and the horse gallops away. Later that evening, Silver returns with a beautiful naked blonde woman on his back. As the Indian chief watches, the blonde enters the Lone Ranger's tent and spends the night. The next morning the Indian chief admits he's impressed. "You have very fine and loyal horse, but I will still kill you in 2 days. What is your second request?" The Lone Ranger again asks to speak to his horse. Silver is brought to him, and he again whispers in the horse's ear. As before, Silver takes off across the plains and disappears over the horizon. Later that evening, to the chief's surprise, Silver again returns, this time with a naked brunette, even more attractive than the blonde. She enters the Lone Ranger's tent and spends the night. The following morning the Indian chief is again impressed. "You are indeed a man of many talents, but I still kill you tomorrow. What is your last request?" The Lone Ranger responds, "I'd like to speak to my horse alone." The chief is curious, but he agrees, and Silver is brought to the Lone Ranger's tent. Once there alone, the Lone Ranger grabs Silver by both ears, looks him square in the eye and says, "Listen very carefully, you fucking dickhead, for the last time. Bring posse." A family are driving behind a garbage truck. A family are driving behind a garbage truck when a dildo flies out and thumps against the windshield. Embarrassed, and to spare her young daughter's innocence, the mother turns around and says, "Don't worry, that was just an insect." To which her daughter replies, "I'm surprised it could get off the ground with a cock like that." NSFW: a doctor is giving a tour of a local hospital. One day a public health official goes to visit a local hospital. The doctor is giving them a tour around the hospital, bragging about what an outstanding reputation it has. He claims that they are the leading hospital in treating rare disorders and afflictions. As the doctor and visitor pass by a patient's room, they see a man furiously masturbating. He has no blanket covering him, nor privacy curtain drawn. To the amazement of the visitor, the nurse in the room proceeds to go about checking his vitals and chart as if nothing was out of the ordinary. "My God!" gasped the visitor, "what is that man doing?" The doctor quickly flipped through his notes. "Oh, you see, this man has an incredibly rare disorder where if he stops masturbating, his heart will explode." "Oh my," said the visitor, "that poor man. What a terrible life to lead." With that, they continue down the hall until they happen across another room with the door wide open. The man inside is laying back in bliss while a pretty young nurse is enthusiastically sucking his dick. "Oh my God!" screams the visitor, "what on earth is going on here? This is completely unacceptable." Once again, the doctor flips through his notes. "Oh. You see, this patient has the same disorder as the last one, but his health insurance is significantly better." An old man applies for a job as a woodcutter, but the boss doesn't think he's fit enough. He tells the boss he is able to cut down any tree in a single swing. To prove this, he goes outside, hits a 5-foot tree with his axe, and it falls over. The boss is impressed. The old man then repeats this with a 10-foot tree. Then a 30-foot tree. Finally, he takes his axe up to an 80-foot redwood, swings, and the giant tree comes tumbling down. The boss is amazed, and asks the man how he learned to do that. The man says, "I practiced in the Sahara forest." "Don't you mean the Sahara Desert?" the boss asks. "Well, yes," says the old man, "that's what they call it now." How much does it cost to buy a large singing group? You mean a choir? Fine. How much does it cost to acquire a large singing group? A woman visits a flower shop to get some flowers for her mother. As she's perusing, she notices the most gorgeous rose she's ever seen sitting next to the cashier, and inquires about its origin. "Oh," Sorry, the cashier replies. That one's not for sale. I got that as a gift from a fellow florist for hooking him up with a woman I met yesterday. Yesterday? She gasps. How did they hit it off so quickly? Well, he's a wonderful lover, for one. He's a really nice guy, of course. And to top it off, he says, leaning into a whisper, he's got a 10-inch cock. She blushes. Sounds like a catch to me. Where can I find him? He's just a block over. But fair warning, he's also a little kooky. He's only interested in women named after flowers. If I meet someone like that, I send them his way, and then he sends me the flower as a thank you. Yesterday was Rose, and a week ago, I recommended a woman named Violet to him, he says, indicating a slightly wilted violet in a vase behind him. The woman thanks him for the info and leaves the shop, bitter about her own name. Undeterred, she visits the well-endowed florist. She steps up to the counter and pointedly says, I heard you are particularly skilled in certain areas. He smirks. What is your name? Pouting slightly, she replies Chris. His smile falters, and his head sinks as he shakes his head. Chris's heart drops. Well then, if it's not too much trouble, I'd like some flowers for my mother. Suddenly, he brightens up again. Without another word, he takes her hand and locks the shop door. 3 hours of mind-altering sex later, she bids him goodbye with a kiss. And please, he says, tell your mother she is welcome to as many flowers from my shop as she would like. Taken aback, she promises to convey the message, and calls her mother that night to tell her everything. The next day, Chris feels like $1,000,000 and swings by the original florist's shop. I just wanted to thank you for telling me about that gentleman. He was amazing. He smiles sheepishly. I suppose I should thank you too. I just got another beautiful flower for recommending you to him. Really? What flower could he have possibly sent that was named after me? The florist sighs. Chrysanthemum. A man sees a lady in a bar with a large bosom. He asks, excuse me, can I bite your tits for $1,000? She says, hell yeah. So they go to a secluded corner, and she opens her blouse. The man puts his face in her tits for nearly 5 minutes. Eventually the lady asks, aren't you gonna bite them? He says, nah, it's too expensive. Genie, you have 3 wishes. Me, I've seen this before. Whatever I wish for will come back and bite me in some way. Genie, I promise that won't happen. I'm so sure it won't. I'll give you infinite wishes if it does. Me, okay. I wish for a boomerang with teeth. Genie, you son of a.